Mental health professionals of Reddit, what is the saddest case of wow this person really fucked up because of how they were treated during their childhood you have ever come across? One of my first cases, when I first started in the mental health field, and I'll never forget, I was providing therapy to a young girl who was pooping on herself after holding it in for as long as she could. Mom originally thought it was some kind of anxiety or fear of the toilet, but after a couple more sessions I found out that the girl was being sexually abused by her stepfather, and pooping felt like penetration to her, so in order to avoid that sensation she would hold it in as long as possible. It was heartbreaking to find that out, and a hell of an introduction to the field. Looked after a 14-year-old. She was in hospital for her 15th birthday. Multiple suicide attempts. I'm talking 20 plus. On her birthday she wanted to call her mum a letter, but had to listen in. Standard procedure. Her mum didn't say happy birthday, but asked what she wanted, telling her she'd buy anything she wanted. Daughter said she just wanted to see her. Mum said she couldn't do that, but she'd send presents. This girl was the daughter of two "successful, very wealthy lawyers." All she wanted was to see/spend time with them, but they thought they could just throw money at her until she was "better." Money can't buy happiness. It's been a few years now, and I wouldn't be surprised if she's had a completed attempt by now. 15-year-old tried to commit suicide after being found guilty of molesting his 7-year-old sister for 2 years. Come to find out his dad had been sexually abusing him for nearly his entire childhood, until his dad committed suicide and blamed his son in his suicide note for ratting him out. Had a kid show up in my office saying he had not eaten all day. He missed his bus and just seemed to not want to leave. I called home, and mom was not answering. The parents were divorced, so I called dad. It was about 8 PM by this point. Dad answers and is obviously drunk off of his ass at a bar. I heard the noise and music. I explained the situation and the dad says he will get someone to drive him to come pick him up. He never showed up. About 10 PM on a Tuesday or some shit now, so I call the police and assist. Learned that the mother had overdosed on heroin and was found dead in the house. The father never showed up, and I was told he never tried to be a part of the kid's life. This kid had some terrible facial disfiguration from birth due to the mother using drugs and drinking during pregnancy. I have no idea how the kid was never removed from custody. I spent a lot of time with him because he didn't like people looking at him throughout the school day. I didn't give a fuck about his grades. I just wanted him to enjoy something in life. We would watch old WWF clips because he loved wrestling. He's dead now. Killed himself. I switched careers after I heard that. Fucked me up. I tried to help. Working in group care, I had a client whose parents would sell her body from toddler age to about grade 3, about when she was taken into care, to regular travelers through town in exchange for drugs and money. Her family and extended family would tell her these people were friends and needed fun time cuddles, and that she was the best daughter that anyone could have because she was special for doing this. When I was working with her in her teens, she didn't trust anyone that ever gave her compliments and would often have panic attacks when people said she did a good job at something or was skilled at something. Was the saddest fallout of abuse I think I've ever seen. She had several suicide attempts and a lot self-harm. Last I heard, she's doing a lot better now after finding a good match for a therapist. I sincerely hope her family never sees the light of day again and that some bad things happen to them in prison. I had a client from a court program who said her dad used to inject her with drugs and as a little kid used to pimp her out to his friends. This was all while she was single digits in age. She spent her life using varying substances and prostituting herself. So now that she's trying to get clean, she's struggled even more with managing the emotions of her trauma. I worked as a counselor in that program for a year and heard many similar stories, but this one sticks out the most because of how hard it seemed like she was trying to turn things around. While doing my psych clinicals over 20 years ago, we had this poor patient that was so abused as child. This took place in the 70s. Her father had a casket at his house. I can't remember if he worked at a funeral home or how he ended up with a casket. He drilled a hole just big enough so a straw could go through it. He would put his daughter in there and close the lid and gave her a straw to put through the hole so she can breathe through the straw. He left her in there for extended of time. The poor girl was destroyed. As the psychotherapist was telling our group the story, our group were in tears. How can someone be this fucked up to do this to their own child? The poor girl is so messed up and cannot live a normal life due to all the trauma this has caused her. Many asked how she was destroyed. This abuse took place over her childhood till adulthood. In the 70s, child abuse was overlooked and often not believed by the child. Who would believe that a person would have a casket in their home? She was placed in a lockdown facility and as students, we never had her as a patient. The psychotherapist explained that she did not meet her milestones and acted as if she was in the wild in a way. She was probably oxygen deprived, that also affected her brain. The poor girl basically grew up throughout the years, being put in that dark airtight casket with a straw to breathe through. It was so long ago and cannot remember the details how she turned out other than she is in this locked facility and has trigger points that sets her off. Our clinical group was crying all day after hearing this case. This broke me and realized that I cannot ever be a psych nurse. I'm sure she suffered other abuse. Most of the patients in the psych facility were from an abusive parents. The next population was drugs, alcohol and chemical imbalance. To be honest, I felt in my own mechanism. I shut down after hearing the casket and straw bit. I could not handle it and felt sick all day. I'm a security guard on a psych unit. I once had a patient refuse her medicine, which is a fairly common occurrence. Normally, that's fine. The doctor will convince them to take their meds the next day. However, this girl was extremely psychotic. In some cases, we have to hold patients down for a shot. As soon as we walked in the room, this girl started screaming, "Daddy, please don't. I promise I'll stop. No, I'll be good." She got the shot and just curled up and started bawling. This was the saddest forced shot we've ever had to give, and all of us left the room completely silent. As a caveat, I do work in the medical industry, though not specifically mental health. This girl's mother was sexually abused as a child, so the parents were very overprotective. They wouldn't allow the girl to be alone with any males other than the father. No uncles, no cousins, no church trips, nothing. They could sleep over at friends' houses if the friend's mother was a single mom, and if that other mom took on transportation duties. The parents were also somewhat disengaged, though, not to the point of neglect. Just distant, wouldn't play, wouldn't go to the library, stay at home, and leave us alone while we watch TV kind of parents. Shut up or I'll give you something to cry about. Life isn't fair, get used to it. There were 3 neighbor kids, all a little bit older. A boy a year older, and 2 girls about 4 and 6 years older. They had a single mom, and since the girl was 5 years old, they lived on the same street. The girl was encouraged to spend a lot of time there, to get her out of the house, and not to beg for dance lessons or to go to the park. There was no man at that house, but that single mom was not a good mom. She drank or used drugs, and had a lot of men over, some of whom clearly had molested those kids. As a lot of older children or young teenagers do, they took out their pain of their molestation on this younger, smaller girl. It went on for 4 to 5 years. The little girl never told her parents, because she had no reason to think they would care. She was pretty isolated other than her interaction with her molesters, and obviously she didn't understand what was happening when it started. Schools talked about stranger danger and adults touching you in your bathing suit spots, but nothing about older children of the same sex. Nothing about being forced to watch pornography or masturbate in front of people. Nothing about how it escalates from there into being touched or being pressured to have sex with their kid brother. Nothing about the coercion of a desperate lonely child hearing "do it or I won't be your friend anymore" from the only people they can spend time with. It was a really sad combination of disengaged yet overprotective parents. The girl ended up being bullied by classmates because she didn't know how to interact in a normal way. Was taken advantage of by a teacher in middle school, then abused in every way by a few boyfriends after that. Had a drug problem, got clean, but still couldn't seem to keep it together for more than a few years at a time before work or personal relationships would implode. Was eventually diagnosed with bipolar disorder. I'm not a mental health professional, but back in 2010, while I was a volunteer worker for a Brazilian NGO, sometimes they would send us to different locations and countries to support some project or to learn from it and apply the concept back to Brazil. One time I was sent to Chile to help out in a community project, and I was supposed to get my meals in an orphanage near there. But that orphanage was not a normal one, it was specific for kids that had been abused. At the beginning some of them were afraid of me, I'm a fat black guy. But after a while they got used to see me around. Before coming there, they explained all the details and how to behave, but nothing can actually prepare you for that. I saw a 7-year-old that was trying to seduce me because she was taught by her dad to act this way her whole life. I saw another that was constantly raped through her life and refused to smile, cause her father always told her to smile while he was raping. One of them was completely silent, and the staff didn't know exactly what happened to her. The list goes on, and it is depressing and morbid. I don't have a word powerful enough to describe what happened to those kids. And the worst part is that most of the things that happened to them was caused by their own parents. That was too fucked up. I was supposed to get my meals there for the whole month, but I couldn't. I started to pay my meals directly from my pocket. Their reality was too much for me to deal with. I work with people with developmental disabilities. One dude was literally chained to a bed and sold as a sex slave as a child. He is totally mild-mannered, sweet, and chill, but if he feels nervous or threatened he hulks out. His group home had a vending machine in the basement, so the staff took him down there to get him a special snack that they didn't have in the kitchen. Being in the poorly lit basement sent him into PTSD hell, and he knocked that thing right over. Another time he was sitting on his bed, and staff was trying to put his shirt on him. The staff sort of hoisted himself up by putting his foot on the guy's bed, making himself loom over the client. Staff got his rib broken with a kick. Everyone's learned to be more cognizant of possible triggers, but you always have to be wary of setting off an episode. No one blames him though, and he is always so apologetic afterward. Almost heartbreakingly so.